Welcome to the EW Podcast. I'm your host, Eric White. Today's episode is a special three-parter in collaboration with Big Brothers Big Sisters San Diego. In honor of Mental Health Awareness Month and in recognition of the challenges to mental health that the past year of coronavirus lockdown have had on all of us, Big Brothers Big Sisters San Diego has asked me to conduct 3 interviews that look at how these challenges have affected children and how an organization like Big Brothers Big Sisters can help young ones get through difficult times such as these. This podcast episode is part of the Big Moves for Mental Health program that Big Brothers Big Sisters San Diego has developed and been encouraging participation in for the month of May. In one of the 3 conversations I have here, I speak with Andrew McGinnis, a Big Brothers Big Sisters San Diego mentor, and his little, Gabe. In another conversation, I talk with Big Brothers Big Sisters San Diego CEO, Tina Rose, and we're joined there by Kristina Varsho, a mother of 2 littles. The first of these conversations, which we'll get into in just a few seconds, is with Zach Rhoads. Zach is the author of Outgrowing Addiction, and he works closely with children on overcoming mental health challenges in a school in Vermont. Here, we talk about the effects on youth mental health he's seen in his work over the past year, and how he thinks a mentor can help children more capably navigate difficult times such as these, among other topics. Without further ado, here is Zach Rhoads. All right, I'm here with Zach Rhoads. Zach is, would you say you're an addiction expert, specialist?
Some people would call me an addiction expert.
Okay.
So yeah, let's go with that.
Okay, well, you wrote the book Outgrowing Addiction, which we've talked about before on my podcast. And the reason we're speaking today is in regards to Big Brothers Big Sisters. And you are relevant because you also work with kids, right? Do you want to explain your role working with kids?
Yeah, well, I work in a school systems. So I work in a sort of behavior management role within the schools. And I do consulting with families. And the bulk of that work is me working with kids, kindergarten through age 12, through grade 12, who are having difficulty with whatever it is. I mean, life difficulties, difficulty with school. And a lot of that work is with parents to, figure out what their role is in helping render their kid competent with compassion. But also a lot of that role, I'd say the bulk of it is me helping kids or just people build themselves up, and to whatever that means, and find relationships and community involvements and whatever else it takes to live a good, meaningful life and get over hurdles.
That's awesome. So that's actually interesting because it's, the Big Brothers Big Sisters program is all about mentorship, and it sounds like you're almost you're pretty much a mentor.
I thought about that, and I think, I would say there's probably a spectrum of what it means to be a mentor, from very low involvement to a lot of involvement. I would say that I fall in that spectrum somewhere, just by virtue of the work I do.
We're going to talk about COVID and the effects that lockdown have had on kids that you've seen in your work. But before we get there, what do you think the benefits of having a mentor figure or someone who's interested in a kid's life other than the parents, how can that affect a kid?
To the extent that being able to communicate with people who are truly attuned to you, or you're attuned to them, or you care about them and they care about you, is a virtue, which I think it is. I think it's helpful and positive. I feel like you can never have too many people like that who are looking out for some area of your best interest. And it's always nice to have someone who is looking out for your best interest, whose interests you care about. And I think that that's kind of what mentorship is. So it's just in general, it's always good to have someone to talk to that in different contexts of your life. People have different roles in your life, and kind of learning that about social interactions is a boon. I mean, that helps people develop. So when kids have adult figures, or I guess they don't even have to be adult figures, just a social figure, someone who they can count on or rely on, or do something meaningful with, it takes a lot of forms, and it's good to figure out what those boundaries are and to what extent you can call on somebody else to do something, or to what extent they can call on you to do something. And so that's a learning experience. But, for some people, they don't have any figures in their life. And so just knowing that somebody cares about you and someone who you can be obligated to is so important in so many ways, if only to help kids realize that they're worth taking care of on their own.
How has maybe your role impacted kids during the pandemic? Have you still been seeing kids during the lockdown? Has that still been a thing you're part of your day-to-day?
Yeah, well, more online than ever before. I mean, it used to be zero online. And so now I see a lot of people and talk to their families, and it's more like problem solving online, but I still am doing the work. And to the extent that I work in schools, I'm there. The schools are open here in Vermont.
Okay. They haven't been always open, right? Though they were locked down for a bit.
They were locked down for that period of time between March, when the pandemic started surging, until summer. But then we reopened in September, and we went 4 days a week.
Cool.
Yeah.
I guess it'll be a little different from here in San Diego, where things are more locked down and starting to reopen. But what sort of lockdown or social isolation specific problems are you seeing in the kids you work with? What do you worry about in the short and the long term?
Yeah, well, I think kids have had problems finding identities, finding meaning in life, finding people who they can rely on, figuring out what their values are, and trying to, do that relative to other people in their network or people who they interact with before the pandemic. I mean, there was a sense that we were like unmoored from some of those things even before any of this happened. And now people have had to find other ways of providing themselves with satisfaction during the pandemic. And fair enough, like a lot of adults that I work with have turned to drinking or drug use when it hasn't really been in their best interest to do so. So I think a lot of kids who were isolated during the pandemic have also lost contact with some of the few connections they had, or maybe all of their connections. So, they've lost the face-to-faceness of things. They've lost the avenues that they had been able to sort of organically and naturally reach out to people to. And I think that's the biggest thing. You have like a school environment. If it's a public school, then you have all these sort of natural resources there to find social engagement. And you might not have it one day, but maybe you join a sports team, a club, or find a friend, or have a teacher that you enjoy. So there's all these different ways that you can kind of reach out. And then everything being open to the community, kids tend to grow up. And when they grow up, they find their niche a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's been very difficult. And I think the pandemic has disrupted that sort of natural outgrowth that most kids that I work with, and I think most kids see on a regular basis.
Yeah, I like that you make that point of saying that these problems are not specific to the pandemic. They just change the ways in which kids are forced to deal with them. I think that's an important point to realize, that it's not as though before the pandemic everything was perfect, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason for mentorship before the pandemic, that's for sure. And I think that, maybe you'll get into it, but I think that the places that sort of thrive on doing that kind of work have found themselves busier than ever and more meaningful than ever during this time. That's for sure.
Yeah, I talked with the CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters San Diego, and she was saying that they have more kids than ever trying to join the waiting list, but they've had to pause their matches because of everything going on and the shortages. Wow. And yeah, it's a bummer. How do you see a mentor specifically during this time helping to alleviate the strains of what is going on with lockdowns and social isolation? How can a mentor be a beneficial figure during this time specifically?
Well, you can get a couple different levels. You can get really in your own head about things. You might have noticed. I mean, you're at home alone with your thoughts for long enough, and just maybe some of the same different people and the same different routines, the same ways of coping with things. You can run into problems that you don't realize are problems until they're articulated, or until you find something that's better. So I think that just having mentorship, having another voice, having someone to speak to helps, if nothing else, just articulate things that are going on and creates an open space for that just conversation to happen. Another positive is that maybe it's not just a person who's having a conversation with you and it's just a dead air conversation, but it's a person who cares about you and could offer some sort of either advice or positive reflections, and someone who you could do that with too. So whereas talking to no one or trying to find some other source of communication with someone who maybe isn't so attuned to you, that could be an okay proxy for social engagement and involvement, but it's not perfect. Having someone that's that you feel you're somewhat close to that gets you out of yourself, and it gets you sort of feeling obligated for someone else, but it also get you feeling like you're doing something to benefit that other person too. That, I think, that mutual sort of altruistic kind of a thing is the magic of mentorship.
Yeah, that speaks to something else that came up during these interviews. I spoke with a big and his little. It was one of the first interviews we did. And yeah, they were saying how this time actually brought them closer together, because now it wasn't just the mentor listening, or the big listening to what was going on in his little's life, but the big was now opening up about the problems he was facing with the pandemic. And so you get this thing where now it's a shared struggle type of scenario where we're both going through it. Now we're in this together type of vibe.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that I don't know if you were planning on bringing this up, so hopefully I'm not jumping the gun, but it's one thing that I encourage people to do who actually work in the school district as mentors in my district, is making sure that they articulate or communicate somehow, whether through words or actions, the benefit that they're receiving from their mentees, because that's hugely important.
Yeah, that plays into the next question perfectly. So thanks for the segue.
Okay, good.
What recommendations would you have for mentors in the program moving forward once things return to normal? Are there things that they should be continuing to do that they've maybe been doing during this time? You just mentioned being vocal about the role that the mentee is having on the mentor. Are there any other things you would recommend?
I think a couple things in mind. So one is that, you can have a true mentorship, which, as I think you've intuited in what I've said, it means that it's a mutually beneficial relationship, and it sort of builds on itself. But then there's there are mentorship programs that totally mean well, but it's really what would you call it? It's inauthentic. So it's like, a guy who's clocking in and let's play chess for a while and okay, I'm clocking out, or someone who's just not. They feel they like the person enough, but it's not it's not their cup of tea, or it's not like something they're involved with enough, or they call out a lot or things like that. So one thing to keep in mind is, be a mentor if you're in it for that sort of a connection where you feel like you want to give everything to that hour or 2 hours or however long you're spending with that person and actually forge a meaningful relationship. I don't know if it's good or bad if you don't have that mindset and then you go into it. Maybe something comes of it otherwise, but it's good to keep in mind not to make anyone feel like it's a forced relationship. The other thing I was thinking is that sort of the reverse of what you asked. I think about successful mentorships throughout the pandemic. One thing that an older person can do for a younger, or a big to a little, is to have a relationship that helps the person learn how to form relationships. And so you have your own relationship, but then the kid can transcend that and also form new meaningful ones. Now they have an idea about what it looks like to actually have a relationship with someone who cares about them. And that can be tricky enough. And of course, it's just as tricky during the pandemic. So if you have someone who's wise enough and who cares enough, they can really make that happen. I think of it in terms like a clinical perspective. I work with kids, but my goal, unfortunately, it makes me sad every time, but my goal is to work myself out of the gig with them, not to leave the relationship behind or say I don't care, but in a professional capacity, I try to get people from not having a skill, not having a resource, to being able to generate the resource on their own. And I think a great mentor will let their relationship last however long that they both feel it's great to let it last. And if they really care about the other person, a big to a little, then they'll help that person forge new meaningful relationships that totally transcend their own.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that speaks to me. I had a little week. I thought we were doing great. And then just one day he was like, yeah, I think I'm over the program. And whenever you kind of reframe it like, hey, maybe I did my task and helped him out, it feels a little better because I was pretty bummed.
That is a bummer of a part of a relationship that's maybe the most meaningful. I think a lot of parents have trouble with this. Like, you get parents and their goal really is to be compassionate, which most parents just do. Most parents I know do. And then to render your kid competent. And that rendering your kid competent means that you're doing things, even though you have compassion for the kid, that don't feel like they're compassionate at the time because you know it's in their best interest. And it sort of follows along that line when you get to a point of relationship where maybe a kid outgrows what you formed together. And there's still, maybe there's still a bond there, but it's not as direct and it's not as often. And so you're kind of watching the kid grow up, and if you really want what's best for them, you just kind of let them do it and not make them
a little
feel
tear
like
in your eye. Just
right, exactly. Like watching a kid graduate or move on.
Yeah.
I will let you know though, I work with a lot of high school kids who I taught a civics class there too. And so I more than just my charges at the high school, a lot of kids would sign up for this class because it was kind of interesting. I would do some funny, maybe inappropriate thought experiments with them just to get them, through a civics and thinking about the real world. Anyway, a lot of them, they graduate and I think, God, it's so sad. I'm never going to see this guy again. And like 3-4 years later, I get emails or somebody coming to visit to let me know what's going on in their life. So maybe that'll happen to you. Maybe.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
Going back to the recommendations for moving forward, you mentioned that the virtual space is something that you've been having to utilize in your relationship with the kids you work with. Is that something you foresee yourself continuing to implement in your work? Do you recommend having that as now a tool that you continue to use, or would you recommend more so just moving things strictly to person?
No, it's a great tool. You know what it's the best for? I think that there are people who, ironically, wouldn't have communicated with someone like me or maybe other people who are mentoring, except that there's something about being in the comfort of your own home and being able to connect that gets people to start. And then once you have sort of that kind of relationship with them, you can move it along that way, maybe eventually person to person. So there's like a harm reduction-ish aspect if somebody is down there. Well, for instance, I work with a kid one time who wouldn't come out of his room. I think the diagnosis was agoraphobic, but he's just afraid of everything. I don't think he was really afraid. I think he's super depressed. And the way that I got him out was handing him notes at his door. I knew the guy and he wouldn't come out. So I'd hand him notes and that would be like, all right, I need to be here for a certain amount of time. We need to communicate. So here you go. Let's do it this way. I'll bet that kid would have done a Zoom call with the video off. If he could just be in the comfort of his own room, no one could see him. And you know what I mean? So,
yeah.
And knowing that I'm from afar, you could click off a button at any time.
Yep.
So I wouldn't recommend a full-on relationship forever being only a Zoom relationship. Although, Eric, that's what you and I have.
Yeah.
But it's a good inroad to a healthy one.
Yeah. So not only could it be a tool for maintaining communication in periods where person to person is not possible, but it could also be used as a tool to acclimate someone to a relationship or to social engagement.
Beautifully put. Should cut out what I said and
just say that.
Yeah.
All right, let's end with any recommendations you might have for mentors who maybe as a result of this time have been experiencing a lack of motivation. They don't feel super inspired by their life or by their relationship anymore. Do you have any recommendations for a big who wants to continue doing it, but is having a hard time staying motivated as a result of what's been going on?
Well, every good therapist I know has a therapist. And so maybe every good mentor could thrive on some other mentorship somewhere. And maybe there's a causal chain that works that way. So maybe that could be useful. I don't know if it's a recommendation or not.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also something beautiful if you can tap into it about when you're feeling down, about a young person and knowing that person has the potential to just thrive. I think that I say this again, but if you can, I know that you're saying, if there's someone, let's say, in despair or feeling like they're just not motivated, they can't even get off the couch, how can they do this? I'm not sure how you do it then, but the idea that somebody else is growing up can sometimes remind people that they'll grow out of some of their worst times as well. So whatever that person can do to sort of channel that, I don't know the best way. Then there's sometimes I think that mentors, they think the onus is on them to figure out like an activity or something to do. Hey man, today we're going to play Uno or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something you can ride that wave of non-motivation or not knowing what to do and put that on the mentee and say, what is it you'd like to do? What would be the best use of our time? And how do you see us cooperating or something like that? And I think that usually if you ask and you ask in a way that's actually inviting for an answer, that somebody who you're mentoring will give you an answer. And so that can steer the ship and turn into something beautiful.
In this next segment, I speak with Andrew McGinnis, a big, and his little Gabe. We talk about how the coronavirus lockdown over the past year has affected their match and how they've faced and overcome the difficulties that it's presented. Okay, I'm here with Andrew McGinnis, who volunteers as a big for the Big Brothers Big Sisters San Diego program, and his little Gabe. Thanks for joining me today, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I appreciate your time. Andrew, if we could get started with you and just describing the match. How long have you guys been matched together? What has the relationship been like up to this point?
Yeah, so we got matched. It's actually, I guess, about 7.5 years ago now. So going on 8 years, and Gabe was 11 when we got matched. He's an adult now, officially, legally, 18. So it's been definitely interesting, kind of being a part of, seeing him grow up and, the different phases of his childhood to now early adulthood has been kind of a interesting experience for sure, and definitely rewarding at least on my end. And I'm sure Gabe can vouch for how much it's done for him, but it's been definitely a blessing and just been a very positive impact even on my life. It's not always just about the littles we find with this mentorship program. It's definitely impactful for the bigs as well. So
yeah, I can vouch for that too. I was matched up for 2 years. He wanted to move on this year, so we called it quits, but I definitely saw impacts in my own life from that as well. So I can totally vouch for that.
Awesome.
7.5 years is a long time. Yeah. Gabe, can you maybe share a little bit about why you initially got into the program and sought a match?
Well, it wasn't like, I guess, my choice. It was more like my mom was like, hey, you should try this. It might be very good for you. So I was like, sure, why not? It was really nice. Actually, I really like this Big Brothers Big Sister things.
What do you like about it?
It's like it gives me another person to talk to, because my family right now consists of like girls and women. And so like I have another man to talk to. Yeah.
We've been through a really crazy year this past year with the coronavirus lockdown. 7.5 years is a long time to be together, but am I right in assuming that this year has been among the most challenging?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
How has the match been affected over the course of this year? What sort of things have changed? How have you dealt with the lockdown, and how have you managed to continue a deep relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely this year has been a challenge, obviously for everyone. And I think for me starting out was realizing that as much as this virus and the impacts it's had with the lockdowns, and just me personally, just realizing there's still someone else out there that's kind of, might need me to be there for them. So I know that a lot of it was just trying to remember to text or call, mostly text Gabe, just to check in, like either weekly or every couple of days, even just depending on what was going on. And, I think for me, it changed a lot because I was able just to kind of ask questions and, he could respond when he wanted instead of having to, when you're in person, you ask a question, sometimes having to give that immediate answer is like a little bit more difficult. So I was able to just ask a little bit more questions that get an idea of what's going on with him and how he's processing everything, and vice versa, also just sharing with me like what I'm going through and kind of my fears or good things, what I'm doing. So I think that was one way of staying connected, and also just expressing maybe a little bit deeper about what's going on. And but yeah, a lot of it was text messages. We did do some Zoom things. Big Brother Big Sisters definitely does a good job of giving us opportunities for different, we did like a couple community interviews. Like one was with like the local police officers, and kind of like a community panel that we got to sit in on and kind of just participate and give our insights and discussions and stuff like that. And I did like a Zoom lunch, I think one time with Gabe, where got him lunch and then I dropped it off, and then we just kind of ate lunch together. So, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely different, but just trying to navigate outside the box a little bit and still stay connected was definitely a challenge. But, in some ways, I think we got to know each other a little bit deeper than, over the last 7 years.
Yeah, there is something special. I mean, bonding about going through a difficult time together. You guys had been together for 6 years at that point, and maybe hadn't had the chance to bond on going through the same sort of struggle and talking about two different experiences and meeting in the middle of, how are we dealing with this common, struggle. Have there been any specific like mental health challenges that you guys have been dealing with? Has there been any, Gabe, maybe this is more applicable to you. I'm sure you weren't going to school, so it was probably a little challenging for you. Are you willing to chat about what that was like?
Well, I didn't really my school is very different to where we actually have to do all of our work at home on the computer. So it wasn't very much of a change when the coronavirus hit. But for me, it took a toll on my mental health because I couldn't really go out of the house, meet up with people, and distract myself from a lot of things, because I actually have an anxiety disorder. And in the pandemic, it actually hit quite very big. It quite hit me a lot. So it was very difficult for me to communicate even on the phone. It was just, I don't know, it's a very difficult time for me in the coronavirus. Yeah.
Well, let me just say that I'm super honored and proud that you're willing to do this recording. It's not an easy thing to begin with. So kudos to you, man. That's awesome.
Thank you.
What about you, Andrew? What were some of the difficulties you faced? Is it something you'd be willing to share?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, in my work, I deal with a lot of business owners. So it kind of hit me it hit me like maybe prior to a lot of the lockdowns even happening, because I have some clients that have, family and stuff in other countries where they were kind of a few weeks or few months ahead of us as far as any sort of lockdowns and coming up. So I would keep getting waves of, people panicking, and obviously my own self panicking, but just trying to kind of keep my head above water and positive, and having, every morning I'd wake up to like a new set of my clients reaching out to me, freaking out, and also just not knowing what's going on. We couldn't really control much of that. So, and then just same thing, like I trying to figure out how to, I live by myself. So fortunately have a neighbor that we kind of did the quarantine buddy thing, and we're able to at least kind of see other humans for the first part of it. And just, just an interesting experience to say the least. but yeah, just trying to find different ways for me to not let, I guess, the situation kind of get the best of me. And, definitely there's better days than others starting out, but overall just trying to, just keep positive and keep, myself, in a way of growing. And so I worked probably the hardest I've ever worked this last year, in the sense of hours, I guess, not necessarily in effort, but I think it definitely, and I took a huge pay cut, but at the same time, we couldn't really do much. So overall, it was a challenging year for sure for me. And I think part of that was just having to help other people navigate through probably even going through a worse situation than myself. And just, being able to be a kind of a positive, resource for them, I guess, if you will. So
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to hear both of your situations throughout the pandemic. I mean, I was lucky in that I kept my job and didn't have to take a pay cut like you, Andrew. So I sympathize with that, and I'm sorry to hear that. But it's just interesting how you guys had, you're both going through struggles. They manifest in different ways. And I'm curious, what role did the match play in making it easier to cope with those difficulties? Did it make it easier to cope? Did the match become burdensome? Like, how did the match evolve?
I think for me, it wasn't really a burden, in the sense that, it's pretty easy to send a text message, or, we don't really talk on the phone very often, even prior to COVID. I think I can vouch for Gabe and myself that we're not phone people. I'm more of a text message type person, or social media type connection type of person. But just being able to check in, once a week. I'd probably check in more often, because a lot of our outings, I would plan an outing, and then maybe we'd talk a lot more during the outing, but in between the times, maybe not as much. But this was kind of a little bit more frequent. So definitely not a burdensome. I think it's just more for me, having somebody that I could reach out to and hopefully just be like somebody that they knew they could lean on, or, express anything to, help me kind of keep a little bit more positive mindset. Just knowing that I could be that for Gabe. So I think in some ways we grew a lot more in our match, in our, I guess, our friendship and relationship than prior.
What about you, Gabe? Did you find that the match helped you in coping with some of the anxiety you were dealing with?
Yeah, it quite helped me, because I always had that thought that, like, someone's waiting for me, I guess, like at the end of this pandemic, we might see each other again, or just like that hope, like to see each other again.
Something to look forward to.
Something to look forward to.
Are you guys back to hanging out in person yet?
Yeah, we hung out actually this last Saturday for a little bit. We went and did a outside boxing class. So
was that the first time back together in person?
I think back when the previous kind of things opened up in the summertime, we went on a hike. But since like that was in July, I think we went for Gabe's birthday. Did a hike. I made him work out on his birthday, or for his birthday, I should say. But yeah, so basically since March, this is only our second time hanging out in person. But yeah, now that the things have kind of opened up more, I think we can start to resume a more regular outing.
Yeah.
In-person outing, I should say.
That's the hope. And you're 18 now, Gabe, so you can graduate out of the program, right? I think that's how it goes. Are you still going to stay in it and maintain your relationship with Andrew then?
Yeah, I think so. I might. It's because, like, I don't know, because I might, like, have to work a lot, because our situation here is very not so good. So I might have to work and do a bit of school. So I don't know if I will have time. But, if I do, I'll definitely keep on with the match.
Yeah. And it'd probably be nice just to know that someone you've built a relationship with over almost 8 years is just a text away, right? You can just reach out to him anytime. So you guys have kind of answered this in some way already. But you mentioned that you feel like the match got stronger over this period. How would you compare the match before the pandemic to the match today?
I think it's different in the sense that it was less centered around like outings and events and kind of like just having fun together. More just actually being there for each other and kind of I guess more relational connection than just like centered around events and activities. So in that sense, it was just about, all we could do is communicate with each other. We couldn't really do much else. I guess we could have, but it just seemed like we were more just communicating with each other than actually trying to go out and just, a lot of times for our outings, it was just about getting out and doing something together. We probably actually wouldn't talk necessarily that much during our outings, but just being able to experience different activities and events. And, sometimes the outings were with other people. And so this was like, anytime we were connecting, it was just us really talking to each other. So being involved with Big Brother, Big Sisters, not just on the me being matched with Gabe, but just, through fundraising efforts and, being connected with some other bigs, just really seeing the impact that this has had on, our story is not the only one, I would say. And I can vouch for almost everyone I know that's been a big, actually everyone that I know that's been a big, it's definitely made a huge impact. And I can only imagine the impact that so many littles have had, that have had the mentor to kind of, at least like Gabe said, even just have somebody knowing that wants to hang out with them at the other end of this pandemic that is going to be there for them or even during it. So, hopefully we can, there's so many stories that are not as fortunate, I would say, so many kids that could have used, a big or a little. So hopefully, we can get more awareness out there and get more people to be mentors and knowing that I'm, you don't have to be someone super special or super talented or, rich or whatever. Anybody just being able to be a big is definitely going to have a positive mental aspect on someone's life and the bigs as well. So,
yeah, for sure. I guess as a final question, Gabe, do you think you could see yourself ever being a big when you get older or have more time in the future?
Yeah, I can definitely see myself being a big. I would love to help other people because that's always, I guess, this has always been a dream of mine to help other people in any way I can. So yeah, I might become one.
In the final segment of this podcast episode, I speak with the CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters San Diego, Tina Rose, and a mother of two littles, Kristina Varsho. Here, Tina shares more specific details on the Big Moves for Mental Health program and gives information on how people can get involved, among other topics. And Kristina talks about the positive impact the Big mentors have had on her children during the past year and shares some of the difficulties her children have been facing. As an unexpected bonus, Kristina also shares her own experience being matched in the program as a child and opens up about how that relationship turned into a lifelong friendship. Okay, I'm here with Kristina Varsho, a mother of two littles in the Big Brothers Big Sisters San Diego program, and Tina Rose, the CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters San Diego. Thank you both for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to speak with both of you and get a little info on what's going on with the program since the past year has kind of made you call an audible, as it were, and do things a little differently. So we'll get the mother and the CEO perspective here. But Tina, maybe we can start with you. Sure. In your own words, can you just, as a basic overview, describe the services that Big Brothers Big Sisters provides?
Sure. Yeah, Big Brothers Big Sisters exists to empower young people in our community who really need us the most. And we do that through one-to-one mentoring. So we don't have any community centers. We don't do group mentoring. We carefully screen and then pair volunteers with youth. And we're really proud to be the oldest, the largest, the most well-evaluated youth mentoring organization in the country. And we've been doing it for 60 years this year here in San Diego.
Okay, wow. So 60 years is how long the San Diego chapter specifically has been open. How long has it been open nationally? Do you know?
Over 100 years. So 1904 is when National started, and here in 1961.
So you mentioned some of the youth briefly that your program serves. Who specifically are these children that Big Brothers Big Sisters is matching mentors with?
Yeah, we serve youth who are 7 to 18 years old, and then we also provide services up to age 21 for our graduate littles. So our youth come from a variety of backgrounds. About 77 to 80% are low income. About same amount, 77 are BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color. About 60% of our littles are from single parent homes, mostly female headed households. And a little over 10% are from homes where a parent is incarcerated. And then we also have a unique program that serves our military community. And so about 21% of our kids are youth who have either an active duty parent, a veteran, or a Gold Star parent.
So basically, mostly children who would benefit from having an added adult figure in their life.
Yeah. And that's kind of how our Operation Bigs program got started, was during deployments, families up at Camp Pendleton were calling us, we need extra support. So it's a lot of times a single parent household, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it's just there's an additional need going on in the home or with the child, and they reach out for support.
And Kristina, what about, you have 2 children in the program, is that correct?
Yes. My son is 15 and my daughter is almost 13. And they've been matched with their bigs for the last 3 years, I believe it's been, almost 4 years. And they started when we were down in Santee. My husband was deployed at the time. And when we moved up to Camp Pendleton, we were able to keep with them. And now we're back down to Santee again and still with our same matches.
Wow. So for you, it was that the military family situation where the father was deployed for periods of lengths of time. And so having the additional mentor in their life was something that encouraged you to enroll?
Yes. And I also I have a big sister when I lived in Chicago. So I was in the program when I was growing up when my parents were divorced.
In San Diego?
No, in Chicago.
Okay.
And I'm still very close with my big and her family now.
So this year, the past year with the pandemic and a lot of unrest nationally because of social issues, has presented a lot of challenges for the program. I was a big during that period and definitely felt a complete shift in how we had to go about our match. There was no more in-person meetings. Everything was over Zoom during that period. So one of the things that I think big moves for mental health, the current program has spawned out of this past year. Is that right, Tina?
Yeah, it has. Really just, rising concerns from parents and guardians in regards to their children's mental health at, distressingly acute levels, some even suicide attempts. And it's, the stress of sheltering from home and also trying to do school and also maybe losing their job and so many other pressures. And kids are experiencing that too. And that prolonged stress can really create some, really big problems. And so what we've also seen during this time is that many of our bigs have been a lifeline for our youth and someone that they can just go to and talk to, get some of those feelings out, ask some of those questions, and hopefully not feel like they're putting a burden on their parents by coming to their parent and putting more pressure on them. They have someone else they can talk to kind of share that heavy load. So that's been really important this year.
So what is Big Moves for Mental Health? I know it's a program that's got several different events or aspects to it that are taking place over the month of May. But is there a general overview of how you define the program and what it's intended to do?
Yeah, it's in honor of May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. And we're doing a month-long campaign just to raise awareness and critical funding for Big Brothers Big Sisters. So it really helps encourage our supporters, our bigs, our littles, our parents, to prioritize their mental health and their physical well-being. So we're offering a month of really cool activities, from exercise opportunities to healthy cooking to meditation, all the way through. We're doing tips that they'll get through the email each week. And we are doing a virtual 5K. So we're calling it a 5K anyway. And you can do whatever you want, whether that's ride a bike, run, walk, scoot, whatever you're into. Just make sure you do a 5K, and you can do it wherever you are. So, we didn't want to bring a big crowd together, but we wanted to prioritize mental and physical health.
Yeah. Is this program something you foresee Big Brothers Big Sisters continuing on in the future, or is this specific to the time that we're living in?
I think it probably has a life in the future. It might look different next year, but we're seeing a lot of even corporations wanting to get involved and getting their wellness committees together. People are just looking for opportunities to prioritize wellness right now and also support a good cause.
You mentioned some of the difficulties that the children in the program are facing, and we can see this nationwide in a lot of statistics that have been compiled. It's still early, maybe too early to tell what the exact effects of the past year have been, but I think there's some early signs that it's not good, especially for our children. Kristina, is there anything that you can share about how your children have been experiencing the past year? Has there been any specific mental health difficulties or issues that they've faced as a result of what's been going on?
Yes. Both my kids already, before the pandemic started, have mental health issues, anxiety, depression, OCD, and COVID just brought the worst of it out. We homeschool, but they used to go to the campus once a week to see their friends. And then when COVID happened, they couldn't do that anymore. It was mom, dad, the house. That was it. And it was hard to explain, especially with my daughter, who's a social butterfly, who looked forward to that once a week interaction with her friends. It's like, no, we can't do that anymore. And it brought the anxiety out worse. My son has had issues with suicide in the past, and those feelings came back. And having his big Anthony was life-saving for us. Anthony checked in more often with him. He still does. They text every day. They FaceTime about once a week. And when they were able to start going out again, they spend 6 to 8 hours on the golf course about once a month.
Oh.
And then with my daughter, Erica, she will text my daughter every day or every few days. And then they meet up. We've met up a few times, but we've done it starts where they can walk around and talk. And my daughter knows if she's feeling anxious and can't talk to me, she goes, I want to talk to Erica. By all means, please talk to somebody who you feel comfortable talking to. And both of their bigs have been there the whole time, involved in their school, because as with COVID, they don't want to do their school because the anxiety is there. And both bigs have helped them with, no, let's do this together, or they'll help them over FaceTime with whatever homework they need to do.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome that you've had two bigs that are very involved with your kids and able to help in that way. It sounds like not only are they helping your kids, but it sounds like they might be helping you too in terms of your ability to cope. How is your little's relationship, your children's relationship with their bigs helped you get through this time?
Knowing that they had someone to talk to helped me with my anxiety of knowing I don't have to constantly be watching over my kids and stressing that they don't want to talk to me and something might happen, and they have an outlet to talk to. And that really helped. And then me being able to talk to my big in Chicago helped me as a parent. So we still have that closeness in Chicago, and my kids know that they can talk to them ever also too.
So neat that they have an example of how you relate to your big, sister, and they can see how that's a lifelong friendship.
Yes. And they've actually met them a few times, and both of my kids are named after my big and her husband.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah. You're like a prime example of the program succeeding, huh? That's cool.
I would be lost without my big. Even when I moved to Chicago and we went to Japan, we've always stayed in connection. And when I come to Chicago to visit, her and her family will always ensure that they have time to see me.
Wow. Well, maybe you can both answer this. This question was originally just for Tina, but it sounds like with your background with the program, Kristina, you are well positioned to answer it as well. So the role of the Bigs currently has been much more of a mental health concerned, involved type of role. How is this different from the role that they've played before the pandemic?
I would say that, pre-pandemic, our Bigs were still, right there for their littles, helping them through obstacles. As Kristina mentioned, a lot of our kids come in with mental health issues. And so it's helping them through those things. Of course, it's been greatly exacerbated by the pandemic, but our Bigs have had to get more creative. And through this pandemic, we've seen them step up in big ways. Everything from, where we had to keep social distancing and drop off, a baking set or books, and then over Zoom bake together or read a book together, have a book club, to socially distanced walked, to a Big I just spoke to not long ago who said he and his little are writing a song together on guitar. Oh, cool. And it really is just allowing the kids to express themselves and not hold it all inside.
Yeah, that reminds me of the situation with my little last year where, we had to think of new creative ways to interact with one another. So one of the things that we did was I bought a comic book for both of us. He loves comics, so we would just read Spider-Man together and then talk about it. And we also did we picked a topic of science and each put together a little presentation on it and then presented to each other about space. It was really cool. Kristina, how do you see the relationship of your kids with their Bigs in comparison to your experience, and specifically comparing their past year to what you previously knew Bigs to be?
I think this past year brought my kids and their Bigs closer because of not being able to see them, but having the constant communication back and forth, having them involved and helping them grow in ways that they didn't know they could grow. I think that was a huge difference from last year to this year, just during COVID.
Does the program encourage the Bigs to share their experiences and how they're going through this time, or is it more so just a one-way street right now and either of you can take it?
I honestly feel that their Bigs have shared their experiences with COVID also, how it's impacted their ability to be a Big and what they do in their own personal life. For example, both of my kids' Bigs, they travel for work and they haven't been able to travel. Or when they do travel, they let the kids know, hey, we went out of town for work, so we'll see you in 2 to 3 weeks after we're safe, instead of seeing each other right away. But I think especially for my son, hearing it from his Big that how much it's impacting an adult has made a difference. That's just not children. It's really impacting the adults also.
I think I've heard that same thing from a lot of our Bigs, that they're able to share their experiences. Some of our Bigs have jobs and they've been able to be vulnerable about what they're going through. And they've shown how they've developed a strong mindset through that, and they can pass that on to their little. This is how I'm dealing with these difficult situations. Here's how I'm working through that. And it's just a great example.
Has the program seen had any issues with numbers of mentors during this time? Has there been issues with people having to leave the program because of lost jobs or uncertainty?
We've had more issues just with funding. So that's a reason we're having a virtual event, is because we're not able to hold the same type of in-person events that we used to be able to hold. So with reduced funding came reduced staffing, which meant we had to kind of downsize a couple of our programs. One thing we did see was an increase in volunteer interest, particularly with the social justice issues. People really wanted to make a difference, and they wanted to do something tangible in a way that they could help a youth. And so we did see an increase in volunteering. We just weren't able to process them as well. And we actually had to close down our intake of littles. I'm very grateful we get to open that up at the end of this summer. So we'll take in new littles again. And we've had a waiting list of littles that we'll have, that we'll get to serve. And But I think that as soon as we open that up, we're going to see another increased need for bigs. So we really want to get the message out there that there's kids waiting. We need you. There's about 360 kids on our waiting list right now without even opening inquiries up to new littles. So there's still a really big need for bigs, particularly men, because still about 70% of our waiting list is boys.
Oh, okay. And if I'm correct, most of the volunteers, the bigs, tend to be women, right? That there's this larger percentage of women than men.
Yeah, we do tend to have the opposite in the volunteering. Women that tend to volunteer readily, and it's a little bit more difficult to recruit men.
I hope that this can help drive some volunteers. So there's basically two ways people can get involved with the program. One is to either volunteer and become a big. The other is to make a direct donation, correct?
Yeah, we're looking for matchmakers. So that's something really simple people can do. It's just $10 a month to become a matchmaker. And when you do that, you'll get this whole month of May activities for free. So you'll get to participate in all these health and wellness activities that we're having. And we'll get to stay in contact with you, and you'll know that you're impacting lives right here in San Diego. So that's just $10 a month. Or if people want to fundraise and help us, we'll create a fundraising page for them. And just like any virtual or any real like 5K that you would do, and you'd ask friends and family for support, you can do the same thing and ask friends and family to support Big Brothers Big Sisters on your behalf.
And real quickly, I guess you've alluded to it a little bit here, Tina, but can you maybe provide some more specifics about how donations are used to the program and what people can expect their money to go towards?
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of people say, well, why do you need donations? You know, you're run by volunteers. And while volunteers are absolutely, the heart of our organization, we spend time and effort and funding to recruit volunteers, to screen them, to run background checks, to do references, to do thorough interviews of both the volunteer, child, parent, and then to carefully match them. So we don't just match kids because they both live in Santee. I'm sure Kristina can tell you that she probably feels like her kids are matched perfectly with their big, because we take careful consideration about, personality and interests and, what goals the child has and maybe what that big can offer that child. And then once they're matched, we support them. So a match support specialist, a professional, is in contact with Kristina and also her children and also their bigs. And so that support and training and ongoing events also is what funding goes towards. And it costs $2,000 to support a big and little match for an entire year. So when you compare that to the costs of some other programs, it's actually quite an amazing value for the outcomes that we have seen through the last over 100 years.
Maybe we can end by just talking briefly about what some of those outcomes are. What are some of the things that you see happening to kids who go through the program, Tina? And Kristina, maybe we can just start with you first. What were some of the outcomes you personally experienced, the benefits?
For myself, when I was in the program, I made a lifelong friend and her family. We got to do fun things. I learned a lot of different things. When my big got engaged, her fiance became part of our little get together, and we did stuff. And I saw things I never thought I would get to see living in Chicago, like a farm and cows and stuff like that. And it's just the lifelong experiences it gave me and helped shape me as a person and what I wanted to be when I grew up. And it's something my parents couldn't give me correctly. And I got it from Kim. And she helped shape me the way I am. And I see that in Eric and Anthony, what they're doing to my kids, making them good people for the future and giving them lifelong advice on how to help them deal with such difficult situations now. So if something like this ever happens again, they know, oh, I had this person to help me. This is how we helped, and to help them face daily situations.
Yeah, I think that, what you said is spot on. It's about unlocking the potential that already exists in your kids. They have this amazing potential, but it's helping them kind of define and empower them towards that greatest possible future that they have for in their dreams. And we're keeping kids in school, we're reducing dropout rates, we're seeing academic grades go up, higher self-esteem, more confidence, and improved relationships with adults, with peers, with teachers. So all of those things decrease their likelihood of dropping out, of doing drugs and alcohol, and having more negative type years. So we're trying to keep our youth on a positive track towards a really bright future.
I love that. And I think that as the world becomes more and more digital, one-to-one mentorship programs like this, where there's physical interaction is encouraged. Obviously, the past year has been an exception, but from my experience, it was encouraged to go do new things and be together and spend time in each other's space, regardless if you're going to have a deep conversation or not. It was just about being there and being available. And I feel as though moving forward, it's going to be more and more important as things become more and more digital.
I agree. We're hoping to see each other in person more often. We had a volunteer recognition event this Saturday, and it was, even with masks and social distancing, it was so encouraging and fun to see our bigs and connect again in person like that. And a couple of them were going to see their littles. So we are about 65% of our bigs and littles are seeing each other right now, and we're hoping to see that continue to grow.
Cool. So you're currently seeing an increase in the amount of matches that are spending time in person.
Yeah, with vaccinations increasing and, some of our restrictions going down, we're seeing that they're a little more comfortable to be together. I just want to thank Kristina. It's the partnership with our parents. It's going to make me tear up. It's our parents that are our partners and the gatekeepers to these kids. And so thank you for trusting Big Brothers, Big Sisters with your kids.
Right here now.
It's a privilege to be able to serve the community, partner with our parents.
I think Big Brothers, Big Sisters has been phenomenal in the matches that you guys do. I mean, Anthony and Erica have been phenomenal for my kids. Even with the distance now, they're both still in North County and we're down here in East County, and how we still make our matches work. I take them to them or they come down here and we still get to hang out with them, and they become very much part of our family. And knowing that if I have issues with anything, I can call them and say, hey, they're struggling with this or struggling with that. And within an hour, Anthony will be FaceTiming Jonathan and not say, hey, your mom said this, but hey, how's this going? They word it to where they want to check on the kids, not that mom says you're struggling with this or struggling with that. And I don't think there's any place else that you can find a program like that where they care enough and they nurture the friendships that can last lifelong. I mean, I was in the program when I was 8 and I left Chicago when I was 13. And I'm now 38 and I'm still friends with my big. It's what I want for my kids, to be able to do that with their bigs. And you guys give them resources to do that. You offer the ice skating during Christmas time. You have all the different programs, and my kids enjoy doing that. And their bigs do too. And their bigs know what the kids like. And they do stuff. Like, I don't know many other kids that would rather spend 6 to 8 hours a day on a golf course. And Jonathan and Anthony do. And Kimberly and Erica, they like to go on hikes. They do picnics. They do cooking. And each one big knows what to do with the kids.